after our What Does Not Trying to Fix Neurodivergent People Actually Look Like episode, we had a lot of really great questions about picking priorities and setting neurodivergent affirming goals for kids. Thought we could talk about it today.
Yeah, I think sometimes as parents, we feel that something isn't a good fit for our kid and isn't working, but societal pressures are strong and it can be hard to know what to replace it with. And this is true for all sorts of things. Holiday stuff's coming up. So maybe the matching holiday jammies that grandma sent, it's going to be a sensory nightmare for one of your kids, but you're like, what to do, right? Or you see the new planner that schools expect all kids to use, and you're like, this is going to be a constant fight with my kid, can't wait. When you're feeling that feeling, it's hard, you don't know what to do. Should you try to get your kid to adapt? Should you step in? Further complicating things that we often hear messages from communities like family, neighbors, the school that they need to learn how to do this thing or they'll never make it in the real world if we don't make them do the thing and meet the expectation.
Yes. And that's a legitimate fear. That's coming from a place of love and fear for what the future can look like. But we can get there. We can get them to a place that works for them in terms of functionality. We might just have to kind of rethink it a little bit. And we've talked about this before. We are not advocating for no goals, no expectations, no boundaries, free for all. Like, not at all. Instead, really what we're saying is let's set aside these cultural norms, the pressures, particularly those around the right, air quotes here, the right way to do things. Instead, let's look at our kids as individuals, identify real meaningful goals for them, and then take steps towards achieving that in a way that makes sense for how their brain works and does not add to the stress that's already being experienced.
Yes, yes. So today let's talk about it. How can we pick meaningful priorities and goals for our neurodivergent kids? And how can we help our kids work towards meeting those goals in neurodivergent affirming ways?
Welcome to Parenting Neurodivergent Humans. I'm Dr. Morgan Beidelman. I am a clinical psychologist, former school psych, former teacher, neurodivergent myself, and parent to two humans, one of whom is neurodivergent.
And I'm Breann Colpitz. I'm a school psychologist turned social coach for twice exceptional kids. I'm a mom to a couple neurodivergent kids and a late realized ADHD human, which means I'm double blessed with autism and ADHD. Thanks for being here. We're so glad you're here.
I feel like I'm a broken record here, but the first thing I want to say on this topic is prioritize things that have an impact on one of these four pieces. One is it impacting functioning? Is it creating distress for the child, for the family system? There's something to be addressed there. Is there's something about the way this person is functioning that is shadowing other abilities, that we're missing all of the assets or some of the assets of this person because something is shadowing it. Does that make sense?
Can you say that in a different way? Like
Maybe.
basically the functionality is impacting other areas of strength. Is that what that means?
Yes. So I have many clients that would meet this mold, but I think a good example of it is someone who is a beautiful writer and they have so much anxiety and perfectionism, which is a subset of anxiety around being good enough that they're not writing, or they're spending 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 hours on a couple of paragraphs of writing because they need to get it right. Whatever.
Yes, yes. Okay, I'm with you.
So there's a shadowing of their brilliance in writing. The perfectionism is creating a shadow over the writing ability.
Yes, that makes
Despite
so much sense.
despite this beautiful strength in writing, right?
Yep, yep.
And then kind of core skills that are needed for any type of life goal and things that everybody needs to know how to do in some capacity, in some way that works for them, that we want to be building as we build towards independence and adult functioning so that they can do the things they want to do in life.
Yeah, right. And then once we pick a priority area, identify what really matters. So the big goal, not what society tells us we need to do or what we should be doing. So let's set that aside. So some examples of that. Effective written communication is a big goal that matters, not spelling 3-syllable words. So not getting stuck on that part of it. Connecting with someone in a conversation, not staying on topic for 5 conversational turns. Again, zooming out, what's the big goal? So turning in work is a big goal that matters. Keeping 5 class folders neat and organized is not. We've talked about that. I know, I'm like, are we a broken record? I think so many of these things, it's like we are reprogramming our paradigm, which is one of my favorite words. But yeah, zooming out and not getting stuck in the method.
I agree. I mean, so for example, for that one, right? I think about if my ultimate goal is for my child or a child that I serve to turn in most of their work, like, hopefully all of it eventually.
Right.
What I think we sometimes miss is that we think, if I help this person find the right process, then we'll get that end result. So what we focus on is the process and not the end result. But let's say that person has ADHD or many other profiles. Their process actually might change a couple of times, especially with that ADHD. You could find a process that works for them. Partway through the year, they're probably going to get bored with that system. So they're going to need another one. And so it's not that they have to pick one process and stick with it. It's that we want them to know themselves well enough to maybe have a couple and work with somebody and say, okay, this system is starting to tank for me. I'm going to need to create another one here. That shift is okay. And then the ultimate goal is that we keep our work production up, our work completion up. I do that all the time. I have a paper planner and I have a computer and I switch between them. As long as I'm keeping up with the output, the ultimate result, it's okay.
You know, I'm glad we're doing this episode because I feel like I'm reflecting now about the times that I have been stuck like, oh, habit stacking didn't work for me, or got so zoomed in on a process and getting it wrong that I missed the big picture goal of, hey, are you crossing things off your to-do list? Are you producing the thing that you need to do? Are you getting the things done? And I have felt so much shame. This is even as an adult. I take a course or something on some method of marketing, for example, as an entrepreneur or whatever, and then it doesn't work for me. And I feel like such a failure because I'm like, oh, I can't do this process. I should be able to do it. Completely missing the point of what's the goal. Man, just knowing being in this field of supporting kids and being neurodivergent and whatever, it's like we still have to come back to this. We still have to remind ourselves that this is the way, right? And that the way can change. Did it get us to where we need to go? Let's not forget that part.
Yes, absolutely. I may have shared this before, but I do that around food preparation a lot. I have this vision of how I want to be in my home and I want to bake the muffins every week. I have a very specific vision of what it means to be quote unquote good in that area of my life. And I have all of these things around it. It saves money, it does like all of these things. And I can zoom in and I can do it for sometimes weeks, sometimes months. And then all of a sudden I'll have a low functioning week. And for a long time, I would be like, you're just going to kind of white knuckle it. And so then I'd still order all of the food and I'd try to do the food prep. Then I would just be in a shame spiral about it because I'd order it and then I wouldn't use it. And then I'd still do takeout. And then I've like double spent. And then I'm shooting on myself and I'm shaming myself. I had one of those weeks, maybe I don't know, 3 or 4 weeks ago, who knows? But I had one of those weeks and I was like, I am going to put in a food delivery order, prepared food delivery order from one of my favorite restaurants that also does catering. And so they do larger meals. And I was so proud of that ability to break that cycle of behavior that previously would have really been challenged.
Right. So it's like, what's the goal? To feed yourself. To feed yourself. I think it's fine to have a vision and I do want the muffins, or whatever it is, but
fed is fed, right?
Yeah.
The goal is to myself.
The goal is to stay alive by eating food. Yeah.
And bonus if it's nourishing and bonus if you don't double pay for it.
Yep. That's real.
Yes. Getting back on track, as my friend's mom would say, took a bird walk. Once we have that big goal, then we want to think about the path to really get there. For instance, if we look at my example, what are some pathways to being well fed?
Yeah, right? There's many.
There are many. It is more important that we focus on the goal and then figure out achievable pathways for an individual. Effective written communication is a great goal, something we want for most kids. But we need a map. How are we going to get them there? How are we actually going to help with that? And it doesn't have to be in the form of they need to write a 5-paragraph essay this specific way. There's lots of ways to get there, and we want to figure out a way that works for them.
I think we get stuck in, again, I'm going to use air quotes here, neurotypical pathways of getting to things. And that can be a real sticking point, I think, for when we're trying to find the right pathway that works.
Yeah, I agree. And I think sometimes when we do that, what ends up happening is we get really stuck in all of the little steps.
Yep.
And when we get stuck in the little steps, sometimes we start to lose the big goal, right?
Yep.
I always like to think, like, let's pull back for a minute and let's think about this. If something isn't working or we need to think about it in a different way, here are some questions to ask yourself. Do we need to change the adult expectation or the adult language, like how we're going through the steps in something? Do we need to change the environment? Is there something that we can do that would either alleviate something or make something more accessible? So for example, somebody who I worked with in the past really struggled with sleep. We rearranged the bedroom and it was a game changer. What we didn't realize was they lived in an older home and the bedrooms were on the very top floor and the heat was rising and she was in a loft bed and she was hot, but we couldn't really describe that. So we had to kind of experiment with it. We figured out, oh, you're really stinking hot.
Yeah, right.
Lower bed and see if that helps. Let's get a fan in there. Fan also creates a little bit of white noise, which is really nice. So changing the environment. Again, I think I alluded to this a little bit, but change the expectation if we need to. Does this expectation meet the current need, the current phase of development for this person? We might just need to change that to make it work and then provide accommodation.
Right. And then if accommodations are part of meeting the goal, then we need to teach how to use the accommodation. One thing that I've done in my social groups with kids is let's practice how to fidget. If we're going to use a fidget, let's practice that. How do you use a fidget in a way that is, quote, expected, so that it's not pulling focus from if a teacher's doing a big lesson and it's a whole class thing? What's the appropriate way to fidget during that time? What about if it's work time when, you're just doing your independent work time? All of those things are different situations that impact how we use an accommodation. And if we're not teaching that, then we are missing some important ways to support how to use this thing and how to eventually get to that big goal that we're talking about.
Yes. And I will just add to what you're saying there, and self-reflection.
Yes.
So as they're going through this process of learning how to use the tool, reflecting on, how is this feeling? What do I notice about my concentration? Is this a tool that does work for me? What do I like about this one?
Right.
Really help with that insight, because the more that we foster insight, the more that we can help somebody be their own advocate as they continue to grow and develop, and it's less stigmatizing over time.
Right.
Too.
And it's more about understanding yourself and figuring out what I need. So when you're talking about, when we kicked it off talking about like, oh, well, if they never do this thing, how will they function in the real world, using air quotes, because you've heard me rant on that if you've been around on the podcast. Learning about what I need so that I can meet that big goal in the end. Fidget spinners aren't my thing, for example. That's going to just distract me more. What I've actually learned is that if I just have a clickable pen, that's all I need to get through my independent work. Teaching yourself so that you can be independent eventually and know like, hey, I don't need someone to tell me what fidget to use. Now I'm an older kid in high school or whatever. And I know if I just have a pen that I can, which I don't actually have at the moment, and I'm regretting because that's how I fidget during these podcast recordings, that can be the goal, like figuring out how to get there. And then, hey, I'm independent. I know this about myself because I've done this reflection and someone's taught me this along the way.
Absolutely. And then as you get older, and I'm thinking specifically, we had somebody write in about ideas for fidgets in college. They were just toying with this idea of fidgets for the first time, but they didn't want them to stand out. And one of the questions we posed back to them were kind of like, what kind of things do you feel like you need, right? Do you feel like you need the movement? Do you need some tension and release? And if you don't know, let me give you some categories, right?
Yep.
Sometimes it's a movement. Sometimes there is something about the pressure, something that's like a thicker weighted ball or those cubes that they have now, and being able to squeeze them in and release them can be really nice. Those are two very different types of fidgets. Sometimes it's even just like a material that you like feeling. And so knowing the type of fidget that works for you then can help you kind of grow up with your fidget.
Right.
So
Yep.
it matches your age, stage of development, and allows you to have the level of blending in that you might want, whatever level that is.
Right. Yep.
So really, name of the game here. Oh, shocker. Functionality and building skills.
Yep.
And when we say functionality, we're saying functionality for the person, not meet
Yep.
societal expectation around what functioning should or could look like. And then really building skills, really helping people to build skills towards independence in a way that matches their lived experience, their neurotype, so that they're like, hey, I am always going to be me. How can I feel good in my being? And how can I be functional? And how can I build skills that allow me to do whatever it is that I want to do? Truly.
Right. And right now, because
Yeah.
realizing that that can change over time. I think sometimes we get lost in the real world idea of what's this kid going to do when they're an adult or whatever. It's like, okay, and how about we just focus on the right now of it all? Because I think
Mhm.
sometimes we get lost in the fear of, well, if they don't do it this way, they'll never learn how to do it. And again, functionality and building skills for right now with a long term vision, sure. But just like Morgan's food prep, you may have an ideal way of doing things, and then it may be that you need to order the takeout, or you need to get the whatever for the right now moments. Just let's not get stuck in anxiety cycle about too far in the future for our kids.
Yeah. And I get it. I get that fear. I get that anxiety. And the fact that you're thinking about it for your child means that you're already doing the good work. You're in a
Yeah.
good fight. You're doing good work. And so if we can help you shift your thinking, it might actually reduce your anxiety about your child's future, and it might help them skill build in a way that works better for them. And in many cases, I've seen that actually help kids skill build faster.
Right, because everyone's more chill.
Yeah.
Just remembering there are many pathways to success.
Yeah. Breann, before we kind of wrap here, as we're having this conversation, it's really making me think about if you have a child who's in a public school, the idea of an IEP. So what we're talking about here is in the public school system in the United States, if you have a child who meets criteria for one of the designated disabilities, you can have access to an individualized education plan. And with that, there's an annual review where goals are set. And it makes me think about some ideas for how to write those goals in a way that matches what we've been talking about here today.
Yeah, let's get into that for sure.
A lot of times we hear that the goals we write need to be SMART goals. So that means that acronym stands for being kind of specific, measurable, attainable, realistic or relevant, and then timely. And as we've been talking today, what we've been talking about is kind of shifting the way that we're thinking about goals. And so a lot of times when we write these goals, well-intentioned teachers, well-intentioned teammates, they're sitting there and they will often do something like so-and-so will be able to write 5 3-syllable words by, this time next year, 80% of the time. Right? Because they're trying to be really specific. It's trying to feel like an attainable goal. They're trying to have it be time bound, the whole acronym of a SMART goal. I think what we want to help people to do, if they are either a teacher listening to this or a parent listening to this, is to potentially zoom out a little bit and say, what's the ultimate goal here? In that example, the ultimate goal is effective communication. If they're being asked to spell it, what we're actually talking about is written communication, right?
Mm-hmm.
So then maybe we zoom out and we look at a goal on effective communication instead of being really nitty gritty on the spelling. This could be particularly useful if you've been doing some version of a goal like that for several years. I do think that there's a benefit in helping, especially kids under the age of 12, 14 or so, with some of the basic spelling, things that they're going to see all the time, so that when they are in a situation, they feel like they can spell it and write it to some degree, and that they know if they can't, they can whip out their phone and double check, right?
Yep.
That to me feels, if we're looking at kids like under 12, under 14, who have type of a spelling goal, I might say that they're spelling, roughly 80% right, and or being able to recognize and use a device to help them fix it. Because
Yep.
that's what we really do in the real world.
Yep.
Right? I was
Absolutely.
getting a dog and I had to fill out an application to adopt a dog. I used my phone to double check because it was a paper application, and a pen was given to me, and I was like, oh gosh, I have to spell, and I have to spell it right.
Or they're not going to give me this dog.
And I was like voice dictating into my phone over and over again, just to be like, I want to double check. Just want to double check I'm spelling this correctly. But that's okay. That is a good tool. And we want our kids to be able to do that.
Yeah, totally. And I would say, like, if you're writing social emotional goals, again, zoom out. Please do not weaponize a kid's special interest and make them not talk about it. That is a way that neurodivergent folks, especially autistic profiles, connect with other people, is through their current special interests. So again, we need to be willing to reject neuronormativity when we're writing these goals. So I don't know any person who doesn't talk about the things they're into. So I think maybe it's just being able to connect with peers in a way that leaves people feeling good. I don't know if you'd exactly write that into the goal, but I mean, the goal is really about connection, social connection, and finding belonging. And so we want the kid to be able to attend to social information, interpret it in a way that makes sense, make a decision, and then respond in a way that leads to connection. So I think if you're writing goals around social emotional things and even pragmatic language skills and things like that, let's not get stuck in.
Can you explain what pragmatic language skills are?
Just being able to make conversations, like the nonverbal parts of speech, being able to use your speech effectively, essentially. It has to do with tone of voice, all the things that aren't exactly the words. Okay. And so being able to connect with people. So let's not get stuck in the like 5 conversational reciprocal conversation turns, like let's just zoom out and see, like, can this kid connect with other peers? And do they even want to? Are they actually good? Do they have peers, friends in other places? Like, is this even relevant to the kid? So again, let's not be setting goals for kids that they don't give a fig about, because that's not a smart goal. So first we got to figure out what's relevant to this human, and then write a goal that fits within their neurotype. So again, not forcing this is what interactions should look like. Let's be flexible with the pathway and focus on the big idea.
Yes.
Little rant there.
That's okay. That's what we're pretty good at.
Yeah. Yeah. So let's just remember the big things here, identifying big goals that really matter and making sure they're relevant to the humans we're writing goals for, letting go of the shoulds around the process of how something is done. If it works, it works. Working towards a goal doesn't need to be about your kid learning or doing something new. So it could just be that we need to, Morgan highlighted these before, change the adult, change the environment, changing the expectation, and providing an accommodation. So let's not underestimate the power and importance of kids learning and practicing how to use their accommodations. That is super important.
Absolutely. And we're going to get there.
Yeah.
We're going to get there. And again, the fact that you're thinking about these things for your kid means that you're already on a great path for them and with them.
Absolutely.
Well, thank you for listening. We'll have another new episode out next Tuesday morning. We'll be talking about the additional mental load of neurodivergent parenting. Make sure to subscribe so you don't miss it. We appreciate every time someone subscribes. So thank you. Thank you.
Just going to say, prepare for rants. Prepare for rants. So before we go, I want to give you a resource. This time of year, we're always getting lots of questions about gifts for the neurodivergent people in your life. If that's something you're looking for, we're going to put a link to Dr. Morgan's neurodivergent-friendly gift guide in the show notes. It has everything from games and toys to fidgets, everyday items, and household stuff. So check there for some resources. We want to save you that mental load of doing that yourself. So yeah, check the show notes for that.
As always, if you have a question or topic you want us to cover, like the mental load, which we're doing next week because of you, send us a note. You can message us on Instagram or use the Google form in the show notes.
Along with that, if you are enjoying the podcast, we would love for you to give us a 5-star review, throw a couple words over there. That helps us get pushed out to other listeners. That is such a gift to us. So thank you so much. If we're a good fit for you, join our communities. We would love to have you. You can find us on Instagram. Dr. Morgan is at Dr. Morgan Beidelman, and Breann is at It's Breann Colpitts. As always, thank you to our editor and producer, Erica Carpenter. We are so grateful for you.
Thanks for joining us. See you next week.
Bye. Did we do it?
Did we do it?
I'm always waiting for Erica's reaction, like, oh, guys, or like, okay.
Just a quick disclosure, this podcast is for educational purposes only. It does not constitute a psychological client relationship and should not be used in place of expert evaluation or therapy.
Okay, you start us off whenever you're ready.
Oh God, well, I'm at the wrong spot. Oh yeah. God, you guys. Woo! I think I need another cup of coffee. Okay.